Ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up our series, The Anatomy of Faith, as always, I want to thank TorahAnytime.com for taping these shiurim and making them available to a much wider public. And Yasher Kachachem V'Chelchem L'Araisa, Hashem Shabi Matzliach. Okay. Facting faces. That is the title of tonight's class, and it's improper English. You'll ask me why we are facting faces tonight. Well, the reason is, as the great Chacham Marlo Thomas once said, never face facts. If you do, you'll never get up in the morning. So instead of facing facts, we're going to fact faces. Okay, we're going to study faces, we're going to study the human face, and we're going to share some facts about the human face. And the truth is that the whole theme of this series, I'm not quite sure that there's going to be a continuation of part 3 of the Anatomy of Faith, even though there are many organs we have left untouched and unmolested up until this point. You would think that we could still examine a few more, but I think for the sake of variety, I think we're going to be doing something else when the series resumes. I mean, when the Tuesday night lecture series, that is, resumes. In any event, I really thought that the grand finale, I may eat these words later if we do a third Anatomy of Faith series, but I really think the grand finale of anything we can do on the theme of Mibsari Echsa Lekah, from my flesh I will see God. All right, we started the series quoting the Ibn Ezra that says that man is a microcosm, human beings are a microcosm, and that you can learn much about the macrocosm and hence its creator from studying the human anatomy. That's been pretty much the theme of the whole series. Well, I think that the ultimate, the coup de grace, if you will, of this approach to theology, for want of a better word, for studying Hashem, is the study of the face. And let me tell you why. First of all, when you study the face, the human face that is, you're really beginning to appreciate the uniqueness, kaviyachol, of God's artistry as a creator. Let me share with you, I'm going to give you a running commentary of a Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. The Gemara says as follows. The rabbis taught, this comes to teach us the greatness of the King of Kings, the Holy Blessed One. Because a human, what do you call a guy, what do you call the craftsman or the artist who runs a mint, who casts the dies from which the coins are minted in a mint? A minter? For want of a better word, let's call such a guy a minter. Okay? He says, because a human minter produces many coins, all with the same imprint. Right? If the expression, the die is cast. Like, in other words, we can't change anything anymore. Once the die is cast, everything's going to be a perfect, to use our modern vernacular, a perfect clone. Right? Everything is going to be identical to one another. Right? A human minter produces many coins, he mints many coins, and they all are similar to one another. More than similar, they're identical to one another. Right? Today we have offset, lithographs. Right? There's a lot of artists who can make perfect copies, exact copies, and it's impossible to distinguish one from the other. Even in, like I said, in biotechnology today, such a thing as clones, things that are genetically identical. But the Holy Blessed One mints every human being in the dye of Adam, the first, Adam Arishon, and not a single one is similar to the other one. They're all dissimilar from one another. Then the Gemara goes into why that's so. And then Rabbi Meir continues, he said, there are 3 ways in which each human being is unique, inimitable, and dissimilar from another human being. Their voices, their looks, and particularly all the commentaries say, their visages, the look of their faces, and their personality, their das, their will, their minds, what we would call the personality. Right? And even we know identical twins, which are nature's clones, right? Science is trying to replicate what an identical twin already is. An identical twin is a genetic copy, a perfect copy of one another, right? Nevertheless, they do have distinct personalities, right? And the Gemara goes into why. Fine. This is said succinctly. I couldn't find the source, but there's a famous source. We say a verse in Tehillim, "The ain't sur kelokenu." There is no rock as mighty as our God. So somewhere in the Medrash, the Sage says, "Al tikret sur, el tzayar." Don't read this as sur, as rock. Read this as tzayar, a painter, an artist. Ain't tzayar kelokenu. There is no artist like God. And echoing exactly what this Gemara in Sanhedrin says, because the human artist, once the mold, once the die is cast, everything is identical, and God puts out things that are unique and irreplicable. So, first of all, by studying the human face, the Mara, okay, you could say, well, we could study voices too. Voice is a little bit harder to study. Okay? The human face is testimony to the uniqueness of God as a creator. Just that observation, the mere fact that every human being awaits to ID a human being, right? Everyone today, we go to the airport, we need our photo ID. Right? Once you're above a certain age, they won't accept the birth certificate. You need a driver's license, you need a passport, you need a valid photo ID. And the photo ID does not have a photo of your EKG or your EEG or your fingerprint. It's got a photo of your mug, of your face. Right? Every face is unique to that person. That's what makes the person a unique individual. So, that bears tremendous testimony to God. So right away there, just without getting into particulars of the anatomy of the face or the science of the face or how it relates to the other things, to voice and to das, just the mere realization, the observation that this Gemara makes, that human faces are unique, that's already a kind of Mitzarech Zalakai. From my flesh, from the flesh of my face, I see something amazing about God. This thing that makes God God and the gulf that separates us from Him. And paradoxically, at the same time, it's testimony not to what the gulf that separates human from God, but what unites and what assimilates human beings to God. Because these works of art that the divine artist is producing, they're not still lifes. They're not portraits of other people. They are all exercise in self-portraiture. What do I mean? We all know the famous verse in the Chumash. I'm not even going to make you look it up. But when God created human beings, God said, "Na'aseh adam b'tzalmeinu k'dmusenu." Let us make man in our form and in our image. And in particular, that relates to the human face. Okay? Writ large, the Kabbalists say, and this is something that I've pretty much been emphasizing since the very beginning of the series, that when we talk about the human structure, right, we know that there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, and we say that there are 365 negative commandments, 248 positive commandments, the aggregate of which is 613. Right? So in other words, the human structure is the Torah, and the Torah is the mind of God. All right? So that's true about the structure of a human being in its entirety. All right? What the Mekubalim call the shiur kaima, the stature of the posture of a human being, is in a certain sense a physical embodiment of Torah. But in particular, the human face. Now let me tell you what I mean here. Here I am going to direct you to open your Chumashim. This is in Deuteronomy. At the beginning of Parshas Kiseitze. Okay, it's 969. The bottom of 969, starting from verse 22. I'll give you a second to get up to page 969. Let me give you a little background over here while you're looking it up. When our legal system was up and running, we had 4 forms of capital punishment. Okay? depending on the severity of the sin, that's how severe the capital punishment was. For the most egregious, for the most heinous sins, capital punishment was something we called skila. And skila was a form of execution that basically involved being thrown off a high place and dying from the fall. If that didn't work, if the sinner, if the criminal still survived that, then big boulders were rolled on top of the person. And that's how they died. It's a horrible way to die. It certainly wouldn't pass muster with the constitutional clause prohibiting cruel and unusual punishment. But that is the Torah system of justice. That's the unalloyed truth. I'm not going to distort it for you. Okay. Now let's take a look at this verse. Hanging and burial. Verse 22. When a man is legally sentenced to death and executed, you must then hang him on the gallows. Okay, the Hebrew reads, "V'chiyah b'ish chet mishpat maves, v'salisa os alaytz." You shall hang him upon a tree. I don't know exactly where he got the definition of gallows from. Okay? Now, I just want to tell you, parenthetically, just a little tidbit, a trivia of human history. You know that until Pope Paul VI, in I forgot the name of the encyclical, in the middle 60s, okay, the official policy for 2,000 years of the Roman Catholic Church is that Jews were collectively guilty of deicide, of God killing, that is. Okay, preposterous, ridiculous. How can you kill a God? Whatever. I'm not here to talk comparative religion. I'm here to talk about the history of anti-Semitism. Okay. One of the traditional charges was that crucifixion, that killing a person on a tree, okay, was a Jewish method of execution. Later historical and archaeological evidence proved that no, it was a Roman method of execution and not a Jewish method of execution. But one of the verses that churchmen misinterpreted to further their anti-Semitic ends throughout history was this verse. Because the Hebrew could be translated as, that when a man is legally sentenced to death, and they conveniently deleted the next word, v'humas, and he will be killed, right? You hang him on a tree. When a person is sentenced to death, hang him on a tree. That's how you kill him. Okay, so this was one of the verses that was always misinterpreted. Okay, that's just has nothing to do with our topic tonight. Just a little bit of interesting, historical trivia.
So they deliberately misinterpreted.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they must have had the grammar of Bahumas means and
right.
dying.
Right.
The same way the interpreter has nothing to do. They have the statue of Moses in the Vatican
with horns.
Because they said this is
right. We're actually going to talk about that misinterpretation tonight, if time allows. If I can get to it, we're going to talk about the shining of the skin of the face of Moshe Rabbeinu. That obviously impacts our topic tonight. Okay. At any rate, so here it says that this is the procedure that after execution, post-execution, what do you do with the corpse? You hang it on a tree, on a gallows, it says here. Now let's read verse 23, equally important. However, you may not allow his body to remain on the gallows overnight, but you must bury it on the same day. Okay.
They forgot that one, didn't they?
Right. Well, I don't know. Maybe according to that tradition, he was buried on the same day of his death. I don't know. I don't know that.
Well, they can say
They usually left them hang. Unfortunately, on crucifixion,
Yeah.
they usually left them hanging.
All right, whatever the case.
no, the crucifixion. They didn't die right
Then they would say,
days
but the Jews weren't following their own Torah. They didn't have to say that too.
Okay, ladies and gents, please. We're getting way off the topic. Please, I'm not here to, like I said, to discuss the history of anti-Semitism. Let's stick to our topic here. You must bury it on the same day. Okay. Rashi explains, what does this halacha come from? What are we in such a rush for? These are our most heinous criminals. Okay, these are idol worshippers. These are our rapists of betrothed girls. These are people who sacrifice their children to Molech worship. I mean, these are the most egregious criminals you can imagine. Right? What's the big rush? It says, Ki killas elikim tali. Since a person, let's read on, let's turn the page, who has been hanged is a curse to God. How is it a curse to God? So Rashi, famously quoting the Medrash, brings an allegory. He says, imagine that there was a king, a very noble king, with all the noblesse oblige, all the class, and all the the Weltschmerz, all the concern for society and for his subjects. A good king, not a king the power had corrupted, right? And he had a ne'er-do-well twin brother, prodigal son. The guy was the worst of the worst, right? And somebody sees the king's brother getting whipped with corporal punishment or rolling around in the gutter after a heavy night of binging, right? And he said, look at that, the king rolling around in the gutter. They look the same, right? Man is made in the image of God. Even the lowest of the low, even the lowest human being, the worst sinner, the most egregious criminal, they're made in the image of God. And when you're made in the image of God, it's a curse to God to disrespect, to humiliate even a human corpse. Forget about a living human being. Even a human corpse, that's how far it goes. Okay? But listen to the allegory. Okay? How do you tell twins? You don't tell twins from the back. There are a lot of people who look similar from the back. You tell twins by looking at two faces. So all the super commentaries on Rashi say, the main Tzelem Elikim, when we talk about it, it's obviously an obviously esoteric, mysterious, Kabbalistic concept. What we mean when we say the image or the form of God. Right? But somehow or another it accrues to the human face. Okay? And the way that it accrues, or at least one of the approaches to how it accrues to the human face is precisely what the Gemara in Heaven says. It's about uniqueness. We're not just monotheists. We don't just believe that God is one. We believe that God is unique. There is nothing else like God. Right? When you can wrap your mind around something, an entity, okay, that is absolutely unique, that there can be nothing else like, and that's really part of monotheism. If there's a second God, then God is not absolutely unique. Right? Part of monotheism, part of believing in one God, is believing in a unique and irreplicable God. So somehow, mysteriously, I'll never forget that famous T-shirt, where there's a march, like you see like a crowd of like 10,000 people, and everyone's in black, and then there's one guy in the middle who's either white or like with a smiley face, and the legend reads, "You're unique, just like everybody else." Right? Well, that's the way it is. We are just like everybody else, but we are unique. Right? And the uniqueness is in the face, in the personality, and in the voice. You look at a face and you see something unique. That's godlike. There's something godlike there. That's the Tzelem Elikim. This is unbelievable. Let me read you another Gemara. Gemara Megillah, 28a. This alone is worth the price of admission. I always say, there's always one thing that's worth the price of admission. The big admission we charge here. Gewalt. Right page, wrong Masechta. 28a. Okay. Okay. There were certain great rabbis who achieved great longevity. They lived very long lives. Okay? And they asked Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, "Bameh ha'arachta yamim?" What's your secret of longevity? You had a lot of yogurt, like Bagrat Tapagua, you did an elliptical exercise. What was your trick? Chavetz Chaim's trick, maybe you didn't speak Lashon Hara. How'd you live such a long life? And one of the things he says is, I never looked at the dumus. Listen literally. Tzelem u'dumus. We say human beings are made tzelem u'dumus. I never looked, I never gazed, b'dumus adam rasha. I never looked at the face of the visage of an evil person. Okay? As Rabbi Yochanan says, it's forbidden to look at the face of an evil person. Right? Rabbi Kiva Tzach and Su, he says in Shulchan Aruch, we're not talking about a brief glance. We mean looking, gazing, contemplating. That's something that's forbidden to do. An amazing thing. You shouldn't look. He was very, very careful about it. But the truth is, it's something that's brought in Shulchan Aruch. It's ruled in Shulchan Aruch. It's something, a halacha that we should all observe. If we know a person is a Russia, an evil person, you see Stalin, Yamach Shemai, you see Hitler, Yamach Shemai, don't look at him. Look at him maybe for a second. Don't look at him for very long. If portraits and photographic images are included, I don't know. It's a shmuz in the paiskim. But certainly, to look at a live Russia, you shouldn't look at the person's face. The Marsha says it's the same idea. Ki killas alikim tali. You get negative impressions about God when you look at the face of a Russia. This is God's twin brother, so to speak. Unbelievable. I mean, with the Marsha, I would never say such a thing. If it wouldn't be a Marsha, I wouldn't repeat it. Okay, Marsha is hardly a Kabbalistic sefer. But that's what he says. He quotes the Mekubalim. That this idea of that there's something beneficial at gazing at the face of righteous people, there's something negative and destructive about looking at the face of wicked people, of evil people, right? But there's all a long hakdamah, a long preface about why I think it's so important to give the last class in a series that talks about mibsari echsal lakai, somehow discovering things about God from our own flesh, from our own anatomy. Like I said, the main place. The epicenter of that study is the human face. So let's fact faces a little bit for the rest of the evening. Okay. Reading faces. Okay. You look at people. You can look at a still picture. I can say certain things about a person. Attractive, unattractive, age, race, ethnicity, sad, happy, passive, aggressive, hostile, friendly, a lot of different things in the human faces. And certainly if you're looking at a motion picture, if you're not looking at still pictures, you see the constantly changing communication, nonverbal communication that comes out of the human face. So what do I mean when I say you can read a human face? So again, I'm going to ask you to turn your Chumashim. This is in Exodus 18:21. This is the famous passage when the 18:21. I'm talking about chapter 18:21. It's on page 347. Okay, while you're looking up 347, let me just give you the background. This is the chapter in the Chumash that deals with Yisro, Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, giving him the very good and beneficial advice, rather than judging the entire 2.5 million Jews who made the Exodus himself. You have to set up a judicial system. You have to delegate authority and let other judges deal with the lower problems, if you will. The higher problems they'll bring to you. You'll be the Supreme Court. You'll be the court of last resort. But let other people. Okay, so you have to make a lot of judicial appointments. Moshe Rabbeinu did. How do you do this? Okay, so on page 347, and I hope I have this right, verse 21. Okay. The English reads, but you must also seek out from among all the people capable, God-fearing men of truth, who hate injustice. Okay, that's the English. I'm glad Saul is here tonight. Yeah. So the Hebrew reads, Va'ata techazeh mikol ha'am. How would you translate techazeh?
You will view or look at.
It's visual. Yeah. It's seeing, right? For those of you maybe who aren't great at Hebrew but who daven, we all say, V'sechazena eineinu b'shuva chol tzyon, let our eyes behold. Yeah? A seer, a prophet who can see visions that we cannot, is called a chozeh. Basically, the word chazah is a synonym for re'iyah, for looking, for seeing. Talking about it's a vision thing. Right? Yeah, Chazon Yeshaya, the vision of Isaiah. Right? He was a chozeh. Yeshayahu Navi was also called a chozeh. Right? So chozeh is a synonym for Navi. A distinction I've spoken about in many other classes, I'm not going to go into it right now. So, you shall seek out? No, you shall look. Now I'm asking you a question. What kind of a litmus test, visually, Moshe Rabbeinu looks at people and he sees God-fearing men? I can look at a person's face and tell if they're God-fearing? I certainly can't. I don't know about you. I can see maybe if at that moment, maybe if they're happy or they're sad, or at least making an affectation of happiness or sadness. I'm supposed to see if a person's God-fearing, if they hate injustice.
Bush looked in Putin's eyes. He thought he had a good soul. Remember, President Bush.
Okay.
He looked in Putin's eyes and he thought he saw.
And do you think he saw well, or do you think he misread?
I think he misread.
I think so too. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, but suffice it to say that there is such a thing as looking at a person and seeing more than their emotional state at that moment, seeing the contents of their soul. Okay, this is a direct, this is a simple meaning of the word. It's a measurement. Look and see. Okay.
Maybe
now what?
Maybe look for.
Okay, that's obviously that's Rabbi Kaplan's translation. That's what it means, seek out. Like there's a parenthetical word missing over there. Look for men. Okay, but even so, how do you do that exactly? What test do you submit a person to determine whether they're God-fearing and lovers of justice or not? Okay, is it reputation? I mean, fine. And I don't know if that look for idiom even exists in Hebrew. Okay, I don't know if that exists in Hebrew. A lot of Mefarshim say that the simple meaning of this pasuk is Moshe Rabbeinu looked at people and determined. By looking at their faces, he was able to read their faces, and he was able to determine their soul. More, I would say, much more than just emotions or that moment of emotions. He could literally see into their souls by looking at their faces. Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin explains this as follows. Based on this Gemara in Sanhedrin that I started off, that each person has an individual personality and an individual face. He says that the maskilim knows the people who know the inner workings of both the macrocosm and the microcosm. They can tell, just as you look at a glove and you can figure out that there's a hand inside there, right? You can look at the lavush, you can look at the cloak, which is the face, and you can see what in here is on the inside. And he also explains the Gemara Megillah that way. He says that's why it's so detrimental to look at the face of a Rasha. Okay? By looking at the face of the Rasha for too long, by contemplating it, okay, you're not looking at the face, you're looking at evil, as it were. Okay. There's another thing that Rav Tzadok HaKohen says in another one of his books, Tzidkas HaTzadik. An amazing thing, I always heard this in yeshivas, that this was not just Moshe Rabbeinu, the Adon HaNeviim, the Lord of the prophets, but this was something that every prophet was capable of in the times that the Jewish people had prophecy. And that was this ability to read faces, to look at a person's face, and tell them about their unique soul root, and tell them about what their specific mission on earth is. And in general, we know, look, we're all Jews, we have to keep 613 mitzvahs. If we're a Noahide, we have to keep 7 mitzvahs. Nevertheless, there's a famous question of the Gemara. Avicha b'may za'et tvei. What was your father more careful about? Right? We know that there are different groups of Jews that emphasize things more. There are different individual Jews that have a proclivity for certain mitzvahs or distancing themselves from certain averos. Everyone has their unique skill set, and everyone has their unique talents. And this was something that by looking at the face, a Navi, a prophet of God, was able to see. It doesn't just mean to be able to see into the future or into the past. They can look in the present. They can look at people, at their faces, size them up, and see what's actually happening in their souls. And one of the things that he says that is a surrogate for this in the post-prophetic era, we're not prophets anymore. So what are we to do? How do we know what our mission is? He says, whatever your weakness is, that's where your strength is too. This stumbling block is under your feet. That sages interpret to mean, a person never is able to understand words of Torah until first he stumbles at them. So the plain meaning of that Gemara is that when a student approaches a text in Torah, it's a human frailty, human weakness. First, we always misapprehend it. We always misunderstand it the first time. You have to first make the mistake, then you can arrive at the truth. But he says it's not just talking about Torah. It's talking about mitzvos. It's talking about midos. It's talking about character traits. The thing that we stumble in is something that we can sublimate, that we can turn around and that can be our greatest strength as well. The Mekubalim used to say that sins make a negative sign, in particular on our forehead, on this part of our face. It's a beautiful lyric from a Yiddish poet. I'm going to say it over for you. Only Mrs. Bennett will understand the original Yiddish, but I'll try to translate as best I can. And it goes like this. A person is talking to God, and he says, Reid zu mir gute Werte, ich suche es an Litwische Avara. Wie der Litvak, wie der, ich verstehe, aber ich sage es wie der originelle, wie so ein Dichter hat es gesagt, ja. Und reid zu mir gute Werte und sag mir, als ich bin dein Kind. Und kusch mich herab von meinen Sternen, die Zeichen von meiner sind. The poet said, saying to God, he says, speak kind words to me, speak loving words to me, and tell me again that I'm your child. And kiss away off of my forehead the signs of my sins. In other words, the imagery here is as follows. A little kid goes to the playground and falls and skins their knee or skins their forehead, right? They start crying. And they go to their mommy or their daddy and they say, I have a boo-boo. He says, let me give you a kiss and make it feel all better. This is not medical, this is not an antiseptic, this is not an antibiotic, this isn't a bandage. The love is therapeutic. The kiss heals the wound. He said, this poet had this sensibility, this Jewish sensibility, okay? That a sin hurts. And the part of it that hurts is the alienation from God, the wedge that sin drives between God and His children. And he says to God, you're our parent, you're our father. Speak to us loving words. Kiss the boo-boo. The boo-boo hurts me. And where's the boo-boo? The boo-boo's on my forehead. I had a Zayda, God should avenge his innocent blood. I never met him. The Weislitzer Rav is a chief rabbi of a small Polish shtetl, Vishlitza, Weislitz. And my father told me that his father, Zechron Levracha, had a minig, had a custom, that the Galos Treren, whenever he was overcome with emotion and davening, to the point where he wept, high holidays, other times of the year, where he wept, he would let the tears fall onto the back of his hand, and then he would go like this. He would wipe it across his forehead. As an act of penitence, this idea that on some kind of Kabbalah, he was a Hasidic man, my grandfather, I'm imagining that he knew the Kleine Isis, as they say, the small letters, and he knew a little bit about this mystical stuff. And that was his anhaga, as if to say, I've got this dirt on the forehead, and it's the tears of tshuva, it's the tears of repentance that can cleanse that away. All right, that was his anhaga. You can compare this with the Gayish cap of the world, also, in a certain sense, great minds think alike. Anyone familiar with the novel by Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray? Okay, a masterpiece novel by Oscar Wilde. Okay, well, the basic story, the basic plot of the novel is that a guy goes to like a magical artist and says, I want to be forever young. I want you to capture the essence of my soul on a canvas. And whenever I sin, whenever I do a misdeed, I'll stay young and I'll stay unsullied. But the picture will get the defect, the spiritual defect that's going to accrue to my soul from the sin. And the picture grows grotesque, grows very ugly. Okay? Interestingly enough, this idea that Reb Tzadok HaKohen said, that our weakness is our strength, in the last scene of the story, he stabs the picture, he gets revolted by the picture, he stabs the picture, and they find him withered and dead and dissipated with a knife sticking through his own heart, and the picture has been returned to youthful glory. This interplay between our weaknesses and our strength, our beauty and our ugliness. I don't know. I'm sure he didn't read Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, but they might have been contemporaries, actually, come to think of it. They probably lived around the same era. But at any rate, it's just the parallel is kind of interesting. Okay. Now, that's Jewish reading of faces. Reading the face, reading the forehead. Okay? Prophets, maybe even genuine Mukubalim, that are few and far between. Maybe there are even some people today who have this talent. I don't know. But in case you're thinking that Schwartz is finally gone off the deep end, I got too involved with the subject matter, and now I really took leave of my senses. Let me just tell you that in the secular/scientific committee, there's also a science of reading faces. And that science is called FACS, F-A-C-S, Facial Action Coding System. It's developed by two famous sociologists, scientists, I don't know exactly what their specialties were, Ekman and Tompkins. And let me just give you a few bullets. Obviously, it's a topic that there's dense, thick volumes. There's whole psychology and sociology and forensic science schools that teach this method. But let me just give you some bullet facts about this branch of science. First of all, these men charted, I don't know exactly the musculature of the human face. I don't know exactly how many different muscles or muscle groups they are. But they charted 43 distinct movements of individual muscles. Okay, muscle groups can isolate 43 movements that are not working in concert with one another. Just 43 isolated movements. Okay? Think of it as letters of an alphabet instead of words in a dictionary. Okay? And just to give you an example, okay? 5 muscles working in unison in the human face can produce over 10,000 distinct expressions. 10,000. And I'm sure that there are certain expressions that require many more than 5 muscles working in concert, working in unison. Okay? So obviously you have to be a bit of a savant. You've got to be a bit of a genius to go into this field altogether. And let me share some stories with you. This is taken from an article that appeared in the New Yorker, August 5th, 2002, called Annals of Psychology. It was in New Yorker magazine. If anyone wants the website to see the article in its entirety, see me after the class. Some years ago, John Yarborough was working patrol for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. It was about 2 in the morning. He and his partner were in Willowbrook section of South Central Los Angeles, and they pulled over a sports car. Parenthetically, I grew up in Los Angeles. South Central is another name for Watts. Watts is, for you New Yorkers, it's Los Angeles' answer to Bed-Stuy, Fort Apache. It's the roughest, toughest, highest crime district in Los Angeles. Okay. Dark, nighttime, average stop, Rabbi recalls. Patrol for me was like going hunting. At that time of night, in the area I was working, there was a lot of criminal activity. And hardly anyone had a driver's license. Almost everyone had something intoxicating in the car. We stopped drunk drivers all the time. You're hunting for guns and lots of dope, or suspects wanted for major things. You look at someone and you get an instinctive reaction. And the longer you've been working, the stronger that instinctive reaction is. The Yarborough was driving in a 2-man patrol car. The procedure is for the driver to make the approach and the officer on the passenger side to provide backup. He opened the door, stepped out onto the street, walking toward the vehicle with his weapon drawn. Suddenly, a man jumped out of the passenger side and pointed a gun directly at him. The two of them froze, separated by no more than a few yards. Another parenthetical break. We know from the O.J. Simpson trial what kind of a racist police force the LAPD is supposed to be, right? There was a tree behind him to his right, Yarborough recalls. He was about 17. He had the gun in his right hand. He was on the curb side. I was on the other side facing him. It was just a matter of who was going to shoot first. I remember clear as day, right? Sounds like the Old West. Draw. All right, who's the quickest on the draw? But for some reason, I didn't shoot him. Yarborough is an ex-Marine with close-cropped graying hair and a small mustache, and he speaks in measured tones. Is he a danger? Sure. He's standing there with a gun. And what person in his right mind does that facing a uniformed armed policeman? If you looked at it logically, I should have shot him. But logic had nothing to do with it. Something just didn't feel right. It was a gut reaction not to shoot. A hunch that at that exact moment, he was not an imminent threat to me. So Yarborough stopped. And sure enough, so did the kid. He pointed a gun at an armed policeman on a dark street in South Central LA and then backed down. And the article goes on to say how this officer, Yarborough, scored off the charts on a test that these sociologists, these scientists, I don't remember the exact field, Ekmans and Tompkins developed to test how well you can gauge human emotion by facial expressions. And they go on to say how for some people it's totally intuitive. And for other people you can be trained to develop your skills. It's an acquired science. I mean, obviously to get a feel for 10,000, different expressions or more, might take the better part of a lifetime. But there's certain basic expressions that you can be trained in the techniques of picking up on them and being able to gauge the real emotional content of the person. In other words, he wasn't reading the guy's hand with the raised pistol. He was reading his face. And in his face he saw, this kid's not going to shoot. He lacks the nerve, he lacks the aggression, he doesn't want to go to jail, he doesn't want to start, whatever it is, whatever emotion it was, this kid is not going to shoot. I see it in his face. Okay. One of the things that they teach in this science called facts is something called micro-expressions. Micro-expressions are a fleeting expression that comes across the person's face. Try to think of, the famous or infamous Zapruder film, from the Kennedy assassination, where they run it through by freeze frame, and they listen for shots coming from a different direction, and they analyze, what was the Secret Service man doing at that exact second between frame 32 and frame 38, and so on and so forth, right? Think of freeze frames, right? So if you can have a motion picture, right, but make like a stroboscopic collage out of it, to take each individual frame, you might be able to see a flicker, a little smirk, a little turn up of the lips, a little dip of the eyelid, a little furrow of the brow, a little raising of the eyebrow, okay, that lasts a nanosecond, right? And some people will never be able to see it unless you do stop frame projection. But some people have this hush, if you will, to pick up a micro-expression that's very revealing. You can wear your face as a mask, and you can wear it, how did Shakespeare say? God has given you one face, and you make for yourselves another. Okay? There are forced emotion, real emotion. How many of us go to a chasana, go to a family simcha, we're in a lousy mood, we didn't have sleep the night before, Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, and in my case, I share that honor with the Prospect Park Zoo. I have to stand next to my brother, the animal, got to smile while this guy's standing next to me, right? We all know that, to say cheese for the camera, it's not that hard to smile, okay? But there's certain things that facts has quantified. Something about the muscles around the eyes, where you can distinguish a put-on smile, a plastered-on smile, a fake smile, a say cheese smile for the camera, from a genuine, sincere, affectionate, or happy smile. Okay? So, Ekmans was the guy who did the research, and the fellow who really, inspired him to do the research was this guy Tompkins. Okay? This fellow Tompkins is going to read you some of the stories of his godless, if you will. Okay? Tompkins was a guy who could walk into a post office in the days when they used to have mugshots and wanted posters in the post office, and without reading the legend, wanted for petty larceny or grand theft, he didn't have to look at the bottom. He could look at the people's faces and tell you what crimes they were wanted for. Okay? That's how he trained himself. And he was by no means a prophet. He was by no means a makubal. Okay? He did this with a combination of intuition and techniques that he developed from studying the human face.
What happened to the mugshots? They don't have enough paper?
They're too busy now with the missing children, like from the milk cartons. Okay. The fellow, what did I say? Hemkins and Tompkins. Yeah, Ekman. He first got into an argument with the famous Margaret Mead. Okay? And he said, he told Margaret Mead, he had an idea, he said. What if I traveled around the world to find out whether people from different cultures agreed on the meaning of different facial expressions? Mead, he recalls, looked at me as if I were crazy. Like most social scientists of her day, she believed that expression was culturally determined, that we simply used our faces according to a set of learned social conventions. All right? And basically, this guy's life's work was dedicated to proving Margaret Mead wrong. Okay? Now listen to this. I'm just going to tell you something, and then I'll get back into Torah, hopefully, God willing, in a minute. But just, the research that they did. This guy went all over the world studying different cultures, filming different people. And then he wanted to know, well, maybe there's a difference between westernized societies and primitive societies. So he went into Papua New Guinea, I'm not exactly sure. Okay? And he hung out among two different tribes. Okay? Some of the footage was of a tribe called the South Four, who were peaceful and friendly people. We're all adults here, so I hope you can handle the next paragraph. The rest was of the cuckoo. That's what it says here. Cuckoo. Okay? Who were hostile and murderous, and who had a homosexual ritual where pre-adolescent boys were required to serve as courtesans for the male elders of the tribe. Now listen to this. He did interviews with them. He taped them in hours and hours of tape, different rituals and different expressions, different life cycle events, and so on. He showed the films to Tompkins. The guy's full name was Sylvan Tompkins. When he saw the people of South Four, he said, these are a sweet, gentle people, very indulgent, very peaceful. Then he pointed to the face of the cuckoo. He says, the other group is violent, and there is lots of evidence to suggest homosexuality. Even today, a third of a century later, Ekman cannot get over what Tompkins did. My God, I've ever recalled. Sylvan, how on earth are you doing that? Ekman recalls. And he went up to the screen while he played the film backwards in slow motion. He pointed out the particular bulges and wrinkles in the face that he was using to make his judgment. That's when I realized I've got to unpack the face. Okay? Basically, this guy saw the picture of Dorian Gray superimposed on the faces of these elder tribesmen of the cuckoo. All right? He saw on their foreheads the signs of their sins. Okay? As it were. The violence, the aggression, okay, the other sin that, of course, today, politically correct, we don't call a sin anymore, but okay. All right? So there's something scientific about it. The applications for facial action coding system are many. Okay? It's in psychology. There's a story in this article about a suicidal woman who appeared to be making progress at the mental health care facility that she was committed to, and she wanted a weekend leave. Right? And one of the psychologists who've been trained in facts saw a micro-expression of hopelessness, and he denied her leave. And then in a later interview, she admitted that the only reason she wanted to go home was because she wanted to do it right this time. She really wanted to kill herself. Okay? It has applications in psychology. It has applications in criminal interrogation. Okay? When is the criminal lying to you? When isn't he lying to you? It has applications in counterterrorism. Okay? It has applications in diplomacy. They train people from the State Department who are willing to take courses in facts to do this when they're having negotiations. How much... See, basically, what we would call, how do you see through other people's poker faces? Huh?
Look how they caught this guy. He wanted to throw him the shoe. When I go up the shoe, the guy came in there and was coexisted with them for a year from the State Department.
All right, but that wasn't nonverbal communication. They were very openly speaking about their desire to throw to.
The guy went in from the FBI.
Right.
He played very well the role.
That's right, but they couldn't see through him. They weren't trained in facts, and they certainly weren't Mekubalim and Nevi'im. Okay, now I've just said over the Torah art of reading faces and the scientific art of reading faces, but there are major differences. The major difference is that the scientific approach is predicated on the uniformity of human expression. Right? He's saying I can go to any culture in the world, and there's going to be an agreement of how people express themselves. Whereas the Torah art of reading faces is really predicated on this Gemara I read in Sanhedrin about the uniqueness. Now, is this one of those infamous clashes between Torah and science? I think not, and I'll tell you why. Rav Tzadok says as follows. This is in his Sefer Likutim Amarim. I'm quoting Rav Tzadok a lot tonight. He says that everything... No, I'm sorry, that's the wrong quote. Is this... Yeah. He says all the expressions and all the changes that are recognizable in the human face, all of that has to do with their hearts, which in our vernacular would mean with their emotional life, with your inner emotional life. But the wisdom, the chachma that's in our minds, okay, that doesn't make any recognizable difference. Okay, so exactly what science calls emotions and what we call emotions, he clearly says that there's a difference. There's a place for uniformity, for not being able to see differences, and there's a place for tremendous range of differences. Okay, exactly what Moach and what Lev and his lingo would correspond to in cognitive science and in psychology, I can't tell you 100%, but he basically addresses the issue. There is something about human beings that is totally uniform. That's the die that gets cast with Adam, right? And yet, the unique artistry of God, where there's still a place for uniqueness and still a place for individual expression and identity that inheres in the face. I haven't done the last page of my notes here. Okay, here we go. The Chovos HaLevavos says, I'm paraphrasing, I haven't seen this 100% in the Chovos HaLevavos in many years. Let me preface it with an English expression. Jacob Browdy, I'm not sure who he was, I just saw this on a quotation page about faces, said as follows: always behave like a duck. Keep calm and unruffled on the surface, but paddle like the devil underneath. Okay? You look at a duck, and it's in a pond, and it's gliding across the pond. It looks very placid, and nothing's happening. It's almost as if the wind is blowing it around. But beneath the surface, right? Okay, well, we all played with rubber duckies in the tub. We know how those webbed feet move, right? Okay. L'havdil, the way it's said in Kodesh, the way the Chovos HaLevavos, one of the authors of our great Mussar works, puts it, is he says, "Hachacham tzahalasai al panav v'da'agasai b'kireis levavai." He said, sometimes you have to wear your face as a mask. He says, a wise person, their joy and their serenity, that's what's on their faces. And if they have anxiety, if they have worry, they keep that on the inside. I'll never forget one of my Rabbeim, Beis Medrash, came over to me one day. I was in a funk, I don't know, I wasn't learning well, I don't know, maybe I'd started dating already, maybe that was the problem, I don't remember anymore. Right? But he comes over to me, he says, Dovid, come here, come on. He says, I know we don't teach science here, but do you know what a black hole is? I said, I think so. Isn't that something in astronomy about a very dense star that collapses upon itself and it sucks things in? The gravitational force is irresistible, and it looks to the astronomers, it looks like this black funnel that's sucking light into it. I said, yeah, David. He says, you know what you are? You're a human black hole. Get out of Beis Medrash and go to the dorm. That's not bad enough that you're depressed. You're sucking the gravitational force of your depression. It's sucking everyone else with it. He put me under house arrest, for a couple of days. He says, get yourself together, pick up your spirits, then come back. But right now, you're not fit to what? Okay?
She said, I don't know.
Well, look, he set me up. I didn't see where that conversation was going, If it had been a court of law, my attorney would have gotten up and said, objection, Your Honor, leading the witness. That's what he would have said. Be that as it may, that taught me a lesson for life. That taught me is, you owe it to society. I'm not saying I always live up to this ideal. You owe it to society to put on a happy face. Because depression is contagious. Even though the old aphorism goes, when you laugh, the world laughs with you. When you cry alone. It's not really true. All emotions can be contagious. And when you walk around sad and depressed, and you're being a drama king or queen, as the case may be, and you're wearing your heart on your sleeve, it's very disturbing to other people. And really, what right do you have to do that to other people? You want to deal with your depression? There are professionals you can go to talk to and pay them a nice sum for that. But just to walk around in the midst of society with this hangdog look, it's We would call it bar b'shus rabbi, a public nuisance. Okay? So, Chachmei HaLashon tell us that the word for keruvim were the cherubs, were the image of angels that surmounted the Ark of the Covenant in the tabernacle and in the temple. And it had the faces of babies. And it's deconstructed, I think it's already in the Gemara, if I'm not mistaken, in the Talmud. It says, what does the Hebrew word keruvim mean? Cherubs. It's transliterated. Nobody even bothers to translate it. It's not a translatable word. It's a particular kind of angel, shall we call it, right? So they say the first letter chaf is not part of the shoresh, it's not part of the root of the word. It's a prefix letter. It's the chaf hadimyon. It's the comparative chaf. It's keruvia. Ruvia is Aramaic for a baby. Shenitin lakabel tzura. The commentaries on that say what's the difference between a baby face and an adult face? A baby face really doesn't have a face yet. A baby's face will change. How many ugly babies are there? Right? How many angry babies? You get a nice roll of film and you look at a baby's face, and the truth of the matter is, this science of fact says that they can train mothers to see the pre-smile grimace versus the pre-cry grimace. Grimace is a grimace, but if you look carefully enough, you'll see the one that's about to launch a crying attack, and one that's about to launch the giggles. Right? But at any rate, bottom line is, we've all looked at our own baby pictures, and after a certain age, you say, yeah, I look like that, just bigger, right? But there's a point where it's almost like clay. I don't know, the first 3 months, the first year, the first 3 years, that looks nothing like me. I didn't look like myself yet. Forget about which one of my parents I take after. I didn't look like myself yet. I didn't have it in the face yet. All right? And I think that speaks again to this remarkable capacity of the face to really speak to our uniqueness and to our very identity. Psychologists talk about the period of adolescence as being one of psychologically, not facially, it happens a little bit later psychologically, what we call individuation. You know why adolescents are rebellious? One of the main reasons is adolescents are rebellious because they feel too dependent, they feel too much part and parcel of their parents. Their whole childhood, their parents have been directing them, do this, don't do that, listen to me. They're like not an independent mind, they're like an extension, they're a digit of the parents. When am I going to be my own person? So a lot of the way that manifests itself is in rebelliousness. But the idea is not just to be, ornery or to be disagreeable or to be difficult. It's like a primal cry of, when am I going to be my own individual? And Logan Pearsall Smith, I don't know exactly who that is either, but again, these are just great quotes on the quotable quotes place. And listen to this. He captured this idea very beautiful. I think both of what our Chazal talk about keruvim and what the modern psychologists talk about individuation. He said, don't laugh at a youth for his affectations. He is only trying on one face after another until he finds his own. Right? That's what adolescence is about. I got to try this. I got to try. Half of rebelliousness is I'm going to imitate some other adults. The cool adults, the ones that are only 7 or 8 years older than me, rather than my parents that are 20 years older than me. They're fuddy-duddies. They're ancient. They're Cro-Magnons. They're what was that fossil they discovered last week? They're Idas. Whatever. Right? So that's the idea. The idea is that part of growing up, the keruvim, the cherubic little baby, right? The face is nitin l'kabel tzura. That's not going to be the final face, right? That face, in a certain sense, is a piece of soft clay that can still be molded, and the face is the identity of the person. That's the individual. That's the unique, and that's the mind. That's the personality. Kishem she'em pirtzufen deyasein shavis, kachem pirtzufen shavis. As their personalities, as their minds are not identical, so their faces are not identical. Finally, I want to end with this. I do have to end quick because the other class has to start soon. The word for face in Hebrew is, anybody know? Panim. What's the word for inner in Hebrew?
Pnimi.
Pnimi. So there are no homographs in Lashon Kodesh. Okay? Panim and pnim are the same thing. A face and the inner content are exactly the same thing. The Maharal of Prague says as follows. It says, one of the reasons it's brought in the name of our sages for why Lot, Avram Avinu's nephew, was saved from the destruction of the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah was that he kept Abraham's secret. He went along with his sister / his aunt and his brother-in-law / his uncle Abraham when Abraham and Sarai went down to Egypt, and Abraham had to con the local authorities, the border patrol. He said about Sarai, she's not my wife, she's my sister. Okay? There was only one person in the entourage who knew the truth about the relationship, and that was Lot. And Lot kept his peace. All right? And this is a medrash that Rashi brings. The Maharal, in a super commentary on Rashi, asks a pretty obvious question. He says, you have to be a real rat, to turn him in. What for? That's a schus, that's a merit that the guy should be saved from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, no, you don't understand what our sages are telling us. What he means to say is, Abraham is the one who prays for the salvation of all of Sodom and Gomorrah. All right? There's something about Abraham that resists the destruction there. And the fact that Lot had a pneumius, he had an inner connection with Abraham. He shared a visage. I just say he looked like an identical twin of Abraham. Okay? No, not such a big deal. Genetics. He was a nephew. All right? Was his brother's son, Lot. All right? But the fact that they had a similar appearance upon him, they had a similar face, he says that shows some level of a pneumiastic connection. Okay? In the spirit of the times, it's not an accident that Mashiach is a descendant of both Abraham and Lot. Lot was the patriarch of the nation of Moab. We all know the famous Moabitess princess, Ruth, is the queen mother in Judaism. She converts to Judaism. She's the great-grandmother of King David, and the Messianic line comes from her. Right? It took that pneumius, it took that inner content connection between these two men, Avram Avinu and Lot, to ultimately bring about this old Mashiach. But the real point I'm trying to make is that they make this connection between the fact that they had the same face and they were able to keep each other's secrets because they had the same inner content. When you've got an inner void, there's some place to hide a secret. All right? If you don't have that, then you don't have that. Finally, and this is the last thing I'll say, because like I said, I got to get up to the other class. There's a famous verse in Mishlei that goes as follows: Kamayim panim el panim ken lev ha'adam el adam. Like the reflecting pool. Think the myth of Narcissus. All right, he falls. He looks into he's thirsty. He bends down to get some water, and as the ripples of the water stops, he looks at his own mirror image there, and he falls in love with him. He can't tear himself away from the pool. That's where the adjective of being narcissistic comes from this mythological figure Narcissus. But at any rate, Kamayim panim al panim, like the water that reflects the face of a person, Kain lev ha'adam el adam, so is the heart of one human being to another. Meaning, the same way if I'm looking in a reflecting pool or I'm out in a mirror, okay? If I scrunch up my nose, so does the reflection. If I lift my eyebrow, so does the reflection. If I wiggle my ears, I can't do that, but I wish I could. It's very entertaining to the children, right? Then the reflection wiggles its ears as well, right? That's how human hearts are to one another. There's a sympathetic vibration, okay? Unrequited love is the exception, not the rule. If you want to have a friend, be one. If you show affection to another human being, it reflects back to you, all right? Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, speaking about the unique level of prophecy that Moshe Rabbeinu had. How does the Torah express that? A lot of different ways. But one of the ways it says it is, Kasha Yedaber Ish El Re'eyu Panim El Panim. Like one human being would speak to another face to face. He says, you want to know what face to face means? Face to face doesn't mean what you think it means, like I'm facing you now and we're speaking face to face. On the contrary, two famous prayers of Moshe Rabbeinu that were denied. Partially denied. Prayer to go into Eretz Yisrael. You can look at it, but you can't go in. Look, but don't touch, so to speak. Right? And also, Moshe Rabbeinu says, show me your face. He says, you can't see my face. I'll show you my back. You can't see my face. So that's not what it means that they spoke face to face. Says the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh. This isn't just true in interpersonal relationships between man and man. Kein leiv adam el adam. It's true in our beinam u'makom, in our relationship with God too. If you show God ardor, love, passion, that's how God responds to you. Moshe Rabbeinu had a nafshi chaylas avasach, had a love sickness for God that was unparalleled by any other human being. And that's why he had a level of communication with God. Maybe it was a certain kind of nonverbal communication, according to everything we're saying tonight. All right? Above and beyond the words that he heard, so to speak, the voice of God, the Kain Leiv Adam El Adam, he could substitute the word Kain Leiv Hashem El Adam. And the Ohr HaChaim concludes with depending on where you're holding in your level of spiritual growth, either incredibly encouraging or discouraging words. Before I end the Ohr HaChaim, let me just preface it with a famous Mission Pirkei Avos. The Mission Pirkei Avos says, Kol shedas sheruach hamakam noicha hemanu, ruach habrias noicha hemanu. Anyone who God is satisfied with, society likes such a person too. V'chol she'ein das habrias noicha hemanu, and das hamakam noicha hemanu. Somebody society hates is not beloved by God either. So forget about society, forget about the popularity contest. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says, you want a litmus test for where your relationship God is holding at any given moment in your life? How do you feel about God right now? Because it's a sympathetic vibration. It's Kamayim Panim Al Panim, Kain Leiv Adam El Adam. Like the reflecting pool, that's how the hearts go. If you're feeling enthused, if you're feeling a zeal, if you're feeling happy and excited about your relationship with God, God is very happy with you as well. And Chalila, if you're not, then you're not. So let's all hope as we wrap up the series and as we go towards Matan Torah, about which in Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, all of you saw God panim al panim on this level. Ki'ish echad b'lev echad, there were no ulterior motives, there were no agendas, there were no competing political parties. Everybody had one agenda, Nasav and Nishma, we want to do the will of God. An act of ardor, an act of reckless abandoned love, eloping with God, as it were. It was the ultimate in the love of God towards the Jewish people. Let's hope that we can relive the holiday of Schwartz like that. She's like to a Kabbalah Satira that'll lead to Bias Mashiach from Rabbi Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
I have a what? Oh, thank you. The face underneath the hair I need reconstructive surgery for, but at least the hair is good. Okay. Ladies and gents, if you didn't sign in on the sign-in sheet, please do. And this way, when the next series starts, I'm probably